Hello, my name is Mia Bennett, and I'm here to share a story that's been a big part of my life for the past few years. It's a tale of family expectations, personal rebellion, and finding my own path. To start, I want you to understand who I am and the life I used to lead. I'm 22 now, but it feels like I've been wrestling with my family's expectations for as long as I can remember. My twin sister, Lily, and I were always compared to each other. While Lily was effortlessly excelling in everything she did, whether it was acing her business management courses or being the perfect daughter, my life seemed to be a constant struggle to keep up. Our parents, Dr. Thomas Bennett and Helen Bennett, were the epitome of high expectations. Dad was a respected university professor, known for his stern demeanor and intense focus on his academic career. Mom, on the other hand, was a traditional housewife, deeply invested in keeping up the family's impeccable image. They had a vision for our lives, and it didn't quite match up with who I was or who I wanted to be. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was under a microscope. Dad would often mention how proud he was of Lily and her academic achievements. Mom would tell me how important it was for me to follow Lily's example if I wanted to make them proud. To them, success meant excelling academically, securing a prestigious job, and marrying someone they deemed suitable. For a long time, I tried to fit into this mold. I wore what they approved of, followed their rules, and did my best to be the daughter they wanted. But something inside me was screaming to break free. I wanted to be more than just a shadow of Lily. I wanted to make choices based on my own desires, not just what would satisfy my parents. It wasn't that I didn't love them, it was just that their expectations felt like a heavy weight around my neck. One small act of rebellion was my way of expressing this struggle. Instead of the conventional clothing they preferred, I started wearing bold eyeliner and unconventional outfits. It felt like a tiny, defiant stand against the constraints they had imposed on me. At first, these little changes were met with raised eyebrows and disapproval. But for me, they were a sign that I was inching closer to finding my own identity. The turning point in my story came when I met Ethan. I was in the university library, struggling through another assignment, when he walked in. Ethan was a carpenter in his early 30s, and he was nothing like anyone I had ever met before. He had a way of making the mundane seem exciting, of seeing the world through a lens of freedom and possibility. When he spoke about his work and life, it was clear that he lived on his own terms. Ethan had this infectious enthusiasm for life that I couldn't ignore. He wasn't confined by societal expectations or the rigid plans that my parents had laid out for me. We started talking more, and it wasn't long before I realized how much I enjoyed being around him. He made me feel like I could be myself without any pretenses or fears of judgment. One evening, as we were sitting in a cozy cafe near the university, Ethan took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Mia," he said softly, "I know it sounds crazy, but I can see a future for us. One where we're both free to be who we really are." I felt a rush of emotions. It was the first time someone had spoken to me so openly about a future that wasn't dictated by someone else's expectations. Ethan's proposal wasn't just about marriage. It was an invitation to a different way of living. It was about breaking free from the mold that had been cast for me and carving out a new path together. When Ethan proposed, I knew that my parents would never approve. They had always envisioned me with someone who fit their idea of success, a person who would align with their standards and social expectations. But Ethan was everything they disapproved of. He lived a life of spontaneity and freedom, far removed from the academic and social circles they valued. Despite knowing the challenges ahead, I said yes to Ethan. For the first time, I was choosing to live for myself. It was a huge step, one that would eventually lead to me making some of the hardest decisions of my life. As I prepared to introduce Ethan to my parents, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending conflict. I hoped they might see how happy he made me and understand why I was drawn to him. But deep down, I feared their reaction. That's where my story begins, caught between the life my parents had planned for me and the life I was beginning to build with Ethan. I was ready to face the consequences, no matter how daunting they seemed. Introducing Ethan to my parents was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. My heart pounded as I led him into the house, hoping against hope that my parents might accept him and see the happiness he brought me. Dad was sitting in his study, surrounded by piles of books and papers. He barely looked up when we entered, his attention focused on his work. Mom was in the kitchen, busy preparing dinner. Her movements were precise, her face set in the kind of expression that signaled she was deep in thought. "Mia, there you are," she said, turning as we walked in. Her gaze shifted to Ethan, and her eyes narrowed slightly. "And who is this?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, this is Ethan. He's a carpenter and, well, he's someone very important to me." Dad looked up from his papers, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "A carpenter?" he repeated, his voice laced with skepticism. "And what brings him into our home?" Mom's expression hardened as she glanced at Ethan, taking in his casual attire and easy demeanor. "So, Ethan, tell us about yourself," she said, her tone polite but distant. Ethan, ever the charismatic person, smiled warmly. "I'm a carpenter, like Mia said. I love what I do, and I've always believed in living life on my own terms. I know it might seem unconventional, but I think it's important to be true to yourself." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, and Dad's gaze grew even more scrutinizing. It was clear they weren't impressed, and the tension in the room was palpable. We sat down for dinner, the conversation strained and stilted. I tried to steer the discussion towards lighter topics, hoping to ease the tension, but every attempt felt like it was met with cold indifference. Dad kept glancing at Ethan as if trying to find a flaw in his character, while Mom seemed to be rehearsing a speech in her head. After dinner, I knew we were approaching the inevitable confrontation. As we were saying our goodbyes, Dad cleared his throat and said, "Mia, could you and Ethan come with me to the study for a moment?" My stomach nodded as we followed him into his study. He shut the door behind us, his expression stern. "Mia, I need to be honest with you," he began. "We've always had certain expectations for you and your sister. It's important for our family's reputation and future." I swallowed hard. "I understand, Dad, but Ethan makes me happy. Isn't that worth something?" Dad's face grew more serious. "It's not just about happiness, Mia. It's about making choices that align with the family's values and future. Ethan, while he may be a good person, doesn't fit into that picture." Mom nodded in agreement, her eyes fixed on me. "We've been very clear about what we expect from you. If you choose to be with Ethan, you need to understand that it means going against everything we've worked for and what we believe is best for you." Ethan's gaze met mine, filled with concern. "Mia, what are they saying?" Dad took a deep breath and delivered the ultimatum. "You have a choice, Mia. Either you stay with us and follow the path we've laid out for you, which includes breaking off this relationship, or you choose Ethan and leave this family behind. It's a difficult decision, but one you need to make." The weight of their words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always known this moment might come, but facing it was an entirely different experience. My heart raced as I tried to process their ultimatum. Ethan's hand found mine, offering comfort and solidarity. "Whatever you choose, I'll support you," he said quietly. "But I hope you'll choose what makes you truly happy." The finality of their words and Ethan's unwavering support left me in turmoil. I had spent my entire life trying to meet my parents' expectations, but now I was being asked to choose between my own happiness and their approval. It was a choice no one should have to make, but it was the reality I faced. As we left the study, I knew the decision ahead of me was monumental. It wasn't just about Ethan or my parents. It was about my own future and what I truly wanted from life. The tension and uncertainty hung in the air, and the path forward seemed both daunting and exhilarating. The hours that followed were filled with sleepless nights and endless contemplation. I knew I had to make a choice that would define the rest of my life. It was clear that whatever decision I made, it would come with its own set of challenges and sacrifices. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope and determination to live a life true to myself. The days following the ultimatum were some of the hardest of my life. Every conversation with my parents felt like a battle, each word exchanged laced with underlying tension. I knew that choosing Ethan meant breaking away from the only life I had ever known, but the more I thought about it, the clearer my path became. Ethan and I spent long hours talking about our future, discussing everything from the small details of daily life to our dreams and fears. His unwavering support made me feel less alone in this tumultuous time. He was my rock, the person who made me feel like I was finally living for myself rather than trying to meet someone else's expectations. One evening, as we sat together in the cozy little apartment Ethan had rented, he took my hands in his. "Mia, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. I know this isn't easy, but I believe in us." His words were a balm for my troubled heart. "I just don't know how to tell them," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I know it'll hurt them, but I can't keep living under their shadow." Ethan squeezed my hands gently. "It's not about hurting them. It's about choosing your happiness. You deserve to live a life that feels right to you." The decision was made. I could no longer live a life defined by my parents' expectations. I was ready to embrace a future with Ethan, even if it meant walking away from my family. That weekend, I made the difficult choice to have one final conversation with my parents. I wanted to do it face to face, to let them see my resolve and hear my reasons for choosing Ethan. My heart raced as I walked into the family home, my stomach tied in knots. Mom and Dad were seated in the living room, their expressions a mix of concern and anticipation. I took a deep breath and began. "I've made my decision. I'm choosing Ethan. I can't continue living a life that isn't true to who I am." Dad's face turned ashen, and Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Mia, you're throwing away everything we've worked for," Dad said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Don't you see the impact this will have?" I shook my head, my voice firm. "I see the impact, Dad. But I have to live my own life, not the one you've planned for me. Ethan makes me happy in a way that I've never felt before. I can't ignore that." Mom's tears flowed freely now, her voice trembling. "We just want what's best for you. We thought we were guiding you towards a successful and fulfilling life." I looked at them, my heart aching. "I understand that, but your vision of what's best for me is not the same as what I need for myself. I love you both, but I have to follow my own path." The conversation ended in a heavy silence. My parents, deeply hurt and disappointed, struggled to understand my decision. It was clear that they were not ready to accept my choice. The finality of our conversation hit me hard. I knew that by choosing Ethan, I was closing a chapter of my life with my parents. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but it was a necessary step towards my own happiness. Ethan and I moved forward with our plans, but the beginning wasn't easy. We had to navigate the challenges of starting over, from finding a place to live to adjusting to our new life together. Despite the difficulties, there was a sense of freedom and fulfillment that came with our choice. We married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by Ethan's friends and family. It was a far cry from the grand affair my parents might have envisioned, but it was perfect in its simplicity. I felt a deep sense of contentment as we exchanged our vows, knowing that I was making a choice that was truly my own. The months that followed were filled with adjustments and new experiences. Ethan's carpentry business began to thrive, and he completed advanced training that significantly increased his income. We bought a modest house on the outskirts of Chicago, and I started working as a coordinator for his business. Despite the joy and love in our lives, a part of me still felt the absence of my parents. I held on to the hope that they might eventually come around, but their silence was a constant reminder of the price I had paid for my freedom. Then, the unexpected happened. My parents came to me, not as I had hoped, but in a state of desperation. They had been caught up in a scandal involving Dad at the university, and they had been disowned by Lily and her husband. They were reaching out, hoping for help from the one person they had hurt. As they stood in front of me, their faces drawn and weary, I faced an emotional storm. They had come seeking refuge, but the hurt and betrayal I felt were still fresh. I listened to their plea, my heart torn between the past and the present. In that moment, I realized that despite their need, I had already made my choice. The life I had built with Ethan was a testament to my own happiness and independence. I couldn't go back to the life they had tried to dictate, no matter how much they now needed me. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," I said, my voice steady but full of sorrow. "I've made a new life for myself, and I need to protect that. I can't undo the choices I've made or go back to the way things were." Their shocked and hurt expressions were the final break in our relationship. It was clear that our family ties had been irrevocably severed, and the path I had chosen was now firmly in place. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a profound sense of finality. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with both the pain of loss and the satisfaction of living a life true to myself. With Ethan by my side, I knew I had made the right choice, and I was ready to embrace whatever the future held. Life with Ethan was a journey full of ups and downs, but it was a journey I was grateful to be on. We settled into our new home on the outskirts of Chicago, finding comfort in the cozy space that we could finally call our own. The house wasn't big or fancy, but it was ours. We filled it with laughter, love, and the small touches that made it uniquely ours. My role as a coordinator in Ethan's business kept me busy, and it was rewarding to see our joint efforts paying off. Ethan's carpentry skills continued to shine, and his new certification brought in a significant increase in income. He was earning around $80,000 a year now, which allowed us to build a comfortable life. We even started talking about our future more seriously, imagining a life filled with new possibilities. One evening, as we were winding down from a long day, Ethan took my hand and looked into my eyes with a warmth that always made me feel cherished. "You know, Mia," he said softly, "I've been thinking about how lucky we are. Despite everything, we've managed to create something wonderful together." I smiled, feeling a sense of contentment wash over me. I know. I never imagined things would turn out this way, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Our happiness grew even more when we discovered that we were expecting a baby. The news was a joyful surprise, and it felt like a new chapter was beginning. We eagerly prepared for the arrival of our son, setting up a nursery and dreaming about the future we would build for him. However, life took another dramatic turn when my parents, once again seeking help, reappeared in our lives. The scandal that had previously rocked their world had left them isolated, and they had been disowned by Lily and her husband. They came to me, vulnerable and desperate, asking for assistance. Seeing them again stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. My heart ached for the family I had once been a part of, but I also knew that their actions had irreparably changed our relationship. I was now deeply rooted in the life Ethan and I had built together, and I had to protect that. After hearing their plea, I took a deep breath and made my decision. "I'm sorry, but I can't take you in. I've worked hard to build a new life, and I have to focus on that now." Their disappointment was palpable, but I stood firm in my decision. The finality of it all was sobering. I realized that I had already made the choice to prioritize my own happiness and the family I had created with Ethan. As time went on, Ethan and I welcomed our son into the world. Holding him for the first time was a profound moment, filled with love and hope. He represented the future we had dreamed of, a new beginning that brought immense joy into our lives. Despite the absence of my parents, I found peace in the life I had chosen. The journey had been difficult, but it had led me to a place where I could truly be myself. Ethan and I were building a life grounded in love and authenticity, and it was more fulfilling than I had ever imagined. The story of my life had come full circle. I had faced the struggle between individuality and conformity, and I had chosen to embrace my own path. With Ethan by my side and our son in my arms, I knew that I had found my place. The ties to my past were gone, but the future was bright with the promise of happiness and fulfillment. And as I looked at my little family, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The choices I had made, though challenging, had led me to a life that was truly mine. The journey was far from over, but it was one I was eager to continue, with love and hope guiding the way.